Have you ever been hooked on a story before? Not the kind where you're just casually flipping through the pages of a book or browsing movies up and down or moseying on through a game you aren't really enjoying per se. No, not quite that. Where you are flipping through the pages of a book as fast as your eyes can read, or for my other 2000s kids, fast forwarding through all the trailers for an on-demand movie that you recorded with your parents' DVR, or just blazing through the side quests of a game, going as fast as you possibly can to find out what happens next in the plot. And if so, why does this happen? More importantly, how do video games portray this better than any other form of media? Well, I think I've narrowed it down. It's not the middle, the climax, or the end. It's actually the beginning, the setup to our story as a whole. Chinese philosopher and a personal favorite mentor of mine, Lao Tzu, once said that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. In other words, a game with hours of heartfelt or heartbreaking story begins with just a few moments of well-written world building and attention to detail. Without any further ado, hello philosophers and gamers alike. I'm your host Evan, and with the help of my assistant, the Raven Oriv, today we're going to be looking at what makes indie introductions so good. Without any further ado, glad to have you here. So, what makes an introduction stand out among the rest anyway? For the 3 titles in today's video, we'll be going over 3 sets of 3, because quite frankly there are way more than 9, but I want to smush as many into this video as I possibly can. And first up, we have intense imagery, tone setting, and thought-provoking themes. In the game I believe that bundles these 3 up into a not-so-neat and messy bundle, we have Blasphemous. Now, Blasphemous is a game with a lot of Roman Catholic and Gothic imagery that focuses very heavily on themes of penance and guilt, and has far more examples of this than I could ever fit into one video. But let's start with the beginning. Blasphemous opens with a woman slamming a statue into her chest metaphorically, and literally, in resemblance to self-flagellation or whipping, which in many religions and pop culture references such as Castlevania is a form of either self-punishment or a way of building discipline, to focus on a deity or pull one's attention away from the things of this world. And the statue she's slamming into her chest turns into a sword known as the mea culpa, which in Latin means through my fault, giving us a very small look into the penitent, wink wink, theme of this game as an expression of one's repentance of guilt towards whatever action she believed was a wrongdoing. We see a mysterious figure whom we later find out is simply known as the Penitent One, wake up in what is known as the Brotherhood of Silent Sorrow to find them all massacred, but for some reason, he is allowed to resurrect and take the mea culpa and continue through the temple until he is challenged and kills the Warden of Silent Sorrow. And then, I believe to be not only the most iconic, but the most important scene of Blasphemous' entire playtime. Through an open wound in the Warden's side, the Penitent One fills up his helmet, which is incredibly resemblant of the capirote, a Spanish Catholic ornamental hat meant to point any onlookers away from the wearer and towards God. Sadly, his reputation is stained due to a certain white supremacist hate group, which you can probably figure out, and he puts the helmet back on, drenching himself in the creature's blood, performing a sort of blood baptism on himself, and marching forth on a journey of penitence and redemption. Now, what makes this intro good? Well, for starters, the game immediately lets you know that this story takes place in a cruel, brutal, and unforgiving world. And throughout the opening section, Blasphemous will let you see and feel the misery that is rampant in this land of, as a Christian, what is one of the most terrifying premises to me in a game ever. What if God was evil? Blasphemous isn't afraid to make the squeamish uncomfortable and relies heavily on shock value and Dark Souls-esque puzzle piece storytelling at times. But throughout the game, it invites players to make their own assumptions about why the Penitent One was awoken, and why he was brought through this hellish journey to start with, and leads players to become overall much more invested in this beautiful handcrafted world. And it sets a beautiful standard for the storytelling that the game industry has very much struggled to keep up with since the likes of Miyazaki. Through Blasphemous' intense imagery and brutal tone, we can truly get a sense that this world is not for the meek, and it's truly cruel at its heart. And that is why I believe the intro is so good. It isn't afraid to disturb and shock you. Now, from the gothic dark to the beautiful forests of the Northwest, we have Firewatch. And the three themes I'd like to touch on in Firewatch are sorrow, loneliness, and escapism. Now, Firewatch is a sort of walking/talking simulator game where the player takes control of a disheveled, socially awkward man named Henry, which takes place in the real-world Shoshone National Park in Wyoming in the late 70s. Now, what makes him such an interesting character is what we start off through the story in his shoes, or, well, boots. We follow Henry marching through the forest through a couple of days, and we're introduced to him along these days to telltale-esque choices of Henry's past, in which we are introduced to his lovely wife Julia, a very funny dog Bucket, and watch Henry go through a very typical early and late 20s, falling in love, marrying. And this approach to storytelling is very touching due to the way we interconnect ourselves with his entire life, and are forced to eventually confront Henry's big questions, such as, why is he running out into the middle of nowhere? Is he running from something? And the intro to this game it just puts so much depth into a character so quickly, and it really turns Henry into this deep character with big problems that he doesn't really have any idea how to solve by himself, or sometimes through even the entire runtime of Firewatch. And it allows us to connect with this awkward man who doesn't really talk besides his journal, at least until he meets Delilah. But you'll have to play the game to figure that one out. I'd like to keep this as spoiler-free as possible, but Firewatch's opening sequences really tackle these themes of loss and pain, and what it means to truly watch someone you love fade away. It isn't afraid to hurt you at that, but I can't recommend this game to all of you guys enough. Firewatch is a masterpiece of emotional storytelling and heartfelt, overpowering sequences. Now, for our final entry, we have the most recent of these games that I've played, and this is the second game in my life, besides Red Dead Redemption 2, to ever make me cry. I give you Before Your Eyes. Sorry, getting a little teary, guys. Now, Before Your Eyes, there's three things I'd like to go over. Regret, pain, and once again, escapism into a world that just sadly doesn't exist. Now, I'm going to try and keep this as spoiler-free as possible, but I apologize if I do talk a little bit about the ending of the game, even though this is a video about beginnings. Now, Stoic philosopher and Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius once said that time is a passing river of events, and strong as its current. And in my opinion, there's never been a game or piece of literature alone that has encompassed this beautiful metaphor, more literally and metaphorically, than Before Your Eyes. You see, Before Your Eyes has an option that is heavily encouraged gameplay-wise. A webcam. Now, why the webcam? Well, due to the webcam feature, Before Your Eyes is... it's essentially a live-action PowerPoint through a young boy's life. And whenever you blink, the game moves forward. And using this inevitable bodily function that we all have to do, which is blinking, we are encapsulated in the very beginning when we are in an endless sea of blue orbs, lives lived, mistakes made, all of these things right in these orbs, these souls. Now, we are one of these souls, floating in this endless ocean with the other ones. And as you begin to sink, the screen begins to fade to black. But a ferry bell begins, and you're pulled aboard the ferry by, you guessed it, a ferryman. And he tells us the basics. We're dead. Crazy, I know. And we can only communicate by the previously mentioned blinking. And this gives us a sad but somber realization. He can help us get into the afterlife, but we have to relive our entire life and give him the story by blinking through it. And there's no certain amount of time that will jump forward when we blink. And just like the passing of time, blinking is inevitable. And no matter how much we try, we can't stay. And this is an excellent message to start this game off because it adds such a weight to the scenes in this game. Do you sneak out with a friend or sleep in because mom wants you to be well rested for an upcoming piano exam? The game really goes out of its way to ensure you that the weight of these decisions isn't light. And to be frank, it made me start thinking about the decisions in my own life. Should I start this YouTube channel? Pun intended. Do I ask out the cutie at a coffee shop, or do I just give it another chance? And I think if you all play this game, it'll really give you some of these same conundrums that I had over the course of my life. And the game genuinely has one of the most emotional endings I've ever seen in any piece of literature ever in my entire life. So, with those 3 games, what have we learned? We've talked about a couple different types of intros and some different themes that have been present without, some symbolic in nature, asking big questions early on that spend their running time trying to answer these questions. And I couldn't possibly fit all the games with phenomenal intros into this video, so those of you that are about to flame me in the comment section for having Hollow Knight in the beginning of this, but not actually talking about it, please forgive me. But I think a good point we can all take from this is that for an intro to be beginning or memorable, it doesn't have to be overly action-packed or violent, but it should be impactful to some degree. Whether that is found through shock value or mental and emotional depth, it's just a small part of the story. The fundamental setup that it can give us to the rest of the story, I think, is the most important thing to grasp. From today's video, the most important part of the story may oftentimes be the central plot or the lesson, and the questions posed about oneself after a climactic ending. But would these things even be in consideration without a good beginning? Well, everyone, that brings us to the conclusion of our first video together. And I'm really happy that all of you stopped by. If you're really here, I appreciate it. This is something I've really wanted to do for a long time, and I want to just pour my heart and soul into this for you guys and really show that games aren't just this mindless thing we do. It's deeper than that. It's more. It's been more for me for a long time, and I want everyone to be a part of this. So if you want to be a part of it, please hit the subscribe and the bell button. And I'm speechless. Thank you guys for stopping by. I'd love to see you here again for the journey. And with that being said, God bless you all, and may you walk with the wisdom of the wise. Have a wonderful day.